Jordan here, and thank you in advance for watching this. What we're about to go into are a series of artist talks as part of a series that we had launched as our form of participation for the Fall of Freedom initiative. JTR Presents is a contemporary art museum that offers design services that helps the creative community, helps the community in general, and we seek to positively impact our community and environment through art, tech, and design. So, in relation to this initiative, Fall of Freedom, it started off with 16 artists that did a call to action about 6 weeks ago. And the call was for anybody in the arts to do something, be it in their programming, a project, something for the 22nd and 21st of November of this year as a way for us as a creative community to push back and call out the current administration and their actions against creative institutions relating to censorship, justice, community, truth, and freedom of expression. This is our community's way of saying that we will not be silenced, we will not be censored, we will still continue to fight for justice for all, we'll still continue to fight for freedom for all, and we stand by our communities, especially those that are marginalized. In addition to that, we exercise our freedom of expression, we exercise our First Amendment rights in really pushing back and holding our government accountable. And so with that said, we will be moving on, and I present to you the following artists. All right, well, first of all, I'm really glad you were here, that you got to make it here. Thank you for your time. I'm glad you got to respond to this. So, Fall of Freedom, as a quick recap, is this call for collective action for us to speak back to our current administration as it's currently threatening our institutions, as we're facing a lot in this political and social climate. And the themes that kind of guide us in this is about censorship, injustice, community, truth, freedom of expression. And so I got really excited when you agreed to be a part of this, because a lot of your work, ever since we met at SCAD, has really been about this freedom of expression, truth, and community. Mm-hmm. And I saw that with Home, your exhibition here, in relation to you and your mother, and I think you mentioned about trauma and community, especially trauma on women's bodies. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things, so there's that, there's also the work that we did with Laura from the Transparency Project.
Yes, those turned out lovely. They were so tasty and colorful.
It was so beautiful. And I even remember what you mentioned with one of them, talking about how one of the pieces came out really amplified the femininity that she carried. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a poignant statement. And so, and I think you mentioned before, a lot of your work relates to kind of the challenges about what it is to be a woman. And so I think that's a good place to start there. How does your work address or connect with these themes?
Yeah, about identity, what it is to be a woman in this world. What does that represent, right? Mm-hmm. There is beauty in all things. And we see that with the work I did with my mother, mm-hmm. Looking at her body, looking at how her trauma throughout the years, generational trauma, abuse, addiction, affected her body, but how it created this beautiful, almost like a map of wrinkles and folds and, different scars that really showed what it meant for her to be a mother, what it meant for her to go through hardship, what it meant for her to survive, mm-hmm. and come out as this beautiful matriarchic mother that was just stunning in her own right? Yeah. So if we look at that through the lens of the work we did with Laura too, it's what is it to be feminine? What is it to be beautiful? What it is to have this kind of other representation through the process of cliche veers, right?
Yeah.
And so it's It's taking an imprint, painting her body, which is a very intimate thing to do, right? It's trust, it builds, community, and having this performance piece where we come through and treat her body like a precious object and create this ritual of documenting what she looks like in organic form, right? And there's chaos and there's chance and there's unpredictability. And basically, we paint her body. It's a cliché, so you make a handmade negative, right? And then you take it in, and then you can do printmaking. With us, we use photography techniques and historical process, which kind of adds to that narrative, like history, how things were done throughout the years. The process we used was a process that was, created when photography was first created, like that contact print, making your own negative. And just the beauty that can happen with that and the organic nature, right? And what we got from it was something that was very cosmic, I thought, and very ephemeral, and also to the point where it was quite beautiful and lovely. And it wasn't a direct portrait of her, but it was still something. We can talk about alchemy. I know I'm a crazy little witch, but but like this phenomenal chance, right?
Yeah.
Like this idea of chance and experimentation, and how that experimentation can still lead to something that can be seen as identity and also community. It's women working together to represent women, right? And, I think that's kind of a wonderful thing when we talk about community, because then that strengthens the community of what is it to be a woman? What is it to be feminine? And there's so many drastic interpretations and beautiful art forms that you can make, but it's about us coming together in the feminine and feeling comfortable and trying to tell our own stories. Sometimes those stories can be tragic, sometimes they can be surrounded by trauma, and sometimes not.
Right.
And it leads to just kind of this aspect of chance, which I love.
So it's interesting you talk about almost otherworldly and ephemeral, because I do see that even with the photography initially with home, and because there's this close up on the body that almost feels like you're looking at another terrain, where you, from the stretch marks to the crevices to, like, no matter how hydrated we are, we still have like the wrinkles,
right?
The drying
I got
spots.
wrinkles all over.
Oh man, we all do. It's so like, there's that, and then we move to cliche veneers that, like you said, it's very cosmic, and just how the paint and inks interact with each other. It again, it looks like you're looking at another planet. It's otherworldly. I wanted to bring that, but with the community part, like what you were saying, coming together, from those experiences, can you expand a little bit more? Because my next question is, like, what is community to you, and how do you think we build on it or even maintain it?
Right. Well, if we look at all work, and I know I might be going back and forth and a little ADD space cadet over here, but if we talk about community, right, and if we talk about what it means to be a woman, and then to also embrace all the things women go through, be it trauma, a lot of my work focus on family dynamics, trauma, generational trauma, what that does to the body and soul. And as I get older and as I expand all the things of therapy, my loving therapy and groups, I find myself with all types of different women that have all, it's just sad because trauma has affected so many women, and you don't really realize it until you start building these communities with other women, right? That are there to tell their story, that are there to feel, that are there to share, because a lot of the times they feel like they can't, like in our society. And it's building a community of trust and acceptance and identity and love, no matter what kind of horrific story might be behind it. And I'm not saying that's what we experienced with the work with Laura,
Right.
but talking about the work with my mom, especially, and the work with other women I have done that have been through just horrific traumas and
Right.
trying to, tell their story. And when we talk about community, I mean, that to me, being with my sisters is just so impactful, and to just hear and express everything they've been through and their stories is just, it's like phenomenal to know the kind of abuse and confinement and silencing that happens. And, and I'm sure that can be across, some women want to admit and some women don't.
Yeah, the one thing that comes to my mind right now is the level of intimacy
Yes.
in an unfamiliar, to me, I find unfamiliar. The intimacy at an unfamiliar level with you and your mom, with you and these women, with the nature of photography. Because I think photography, it's a lot of building that safe space for people to express the way you need to in order to capture what you're looking for in the subject. In our work with Laura and even with the project, one of the things I was learning about, it's like just building that space, building the community, letting people be who they are, I think is what really made that project come to be. And so, there was something you were saying about for people to tell their story, right? And I think the big fight that you're having, the big fight that we had with that project is, who is it that controls that narrative? So I think that's the kind of stuff we're helping, because even having, whether it's an exhibition, whether it's the cliche vignettes or the photography, it's a way of platforming those voices. And I find that to be a tool of resistance. So, whether it's in the creative industries or your practice, what do you think resistance would look like? What does that look like?
So if we're talking about resistance, you can go back to the art of using camera and who has that ownership, right?
Okay.
Like it could be, ultimately, if you're viewing from behind the camera, the photographer is going to tell that story, right? They're going to be able to portray, but they should be working very closely with their subject to make sure that representation is properly done and properly used. And on the sense, it does take, like you said, trust, intimacy, and it makes you feel very vulnerable when you shouldn't feel vulnerable to begin with. Me, I'm a very open little box of things, and but there's that intimacy and trust and hoping this person is going to really portray what you view yourself as, right? And if we're getting back, get me back on track. We were talking about censorship,
or just resistance,
resistance.
Yeah, and like this again, who's telling the narrative? Who has control of the narrative?
Yeah, and that's a sticky one with photography, because when you're behind the camera, obviously the photographer is going to direct you and they're telling your narrative. But if you're the subject, the power needs to be in your hands, right? If we're wanting to look at it that way, it should be a collaboration. And when we talk about, if we want to pivot and talk about censorship when it comes to that, right? I mean, a lot of times art that has to do with representing women or their identity, a lot of the times, and I can speak to that, can be censored because some people don't want to see it, especially if we're talking about the work of my mom. People look at that and they're like, I don't want to look at this. This is painful, right? And there's a level of censorship that happens there to where, I mean, even for my thesis show at SCAD, they were like, you can't show it because it has a a naked woman or a naked elderly woman in the photographs. I'm like, but this is an art school, right?
You see naked bodies all the time.
I know, but I guess it was the nature and kind of up close nature of the body, and then the connection between mother and daughter that wasn't that typical dynamic. That was trouble. Like,
it didn't fit their narrative.
No, it didn't fit their narrative, right? And the work is challenging, but it's supposed to be challenging. It's not supposed to be easy to look at. So there's that too when we talk about censorship. And I mean, the most beautiful art to me, especially when we look through the lens of photography, is things that really challenge you, that can alter you and change your perspective when we're talking about censorship.
Yes. So yeah, that still kind of baffles me, right? Especially even in an art school in which that you'd think would be, there's still a sort of narrative that they still have to like pitch to, or a narrative that there can be refined to. But I want to kind of roll back on something you said before. I'm trying to remember the words, but forgive me if I'm paraphrasing. It was something along the lines of the responsibility, I think, of what I understood, the responsibility of the photographer. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that. So like when I was in art school at AMT, my mentor had drilled into our heads the importance, because we're image makers, artists and designers. We set the trend, we influence our community directly and indirectly. So as image makers, we have to take responsibility over the things we create. And so with that, you know, what does that look like? What is your perspective of the responsibility of the creative?
Right.
Assuming we have any.
You know, that's another thing. I mean, we could try to take this responsibility and make this work that we feel is true and honest, but once you release it into the world, it is no longer yours, right?
Yeah.
People are going to perceive it, and they're going to take it the way they want to take it. And so we do have a responsibility when we start to work with our subjects to make sure that we are telling their story in the way that they want their story to be told, in a way they want to be represented. And even though that happens, at some point when we release it into the world, it becomes something drastically different to different groups of people. You know, and that's a big thing with artists. So yes, we have a responsibility. Yes, we should be using our platform to inform and to educate the things that are happening in the world, the challenges for me with, you know, women and the trials and tribulations that they go through, and what that looks like and how that can be beautiful. But at the end of the day, you're going to see something very different from my work than I would. Maybe not you, because we're friends. But, you know, I've had feedback on my work of, oh, wow, this is amazing. This is brave. This is honest. You know, it could be painful to make, but you made it. And on other terms, somebody will look at that may not be comfortable with their own truth, or the truth about things that happen to women, to our community, and they can be like, oh my gosh, this isn't appropriate. Or, oh my God, that is unacceptable. Like, I don't want to look at that. Like, it's
interesting, because I think the way people respond to it is more telling about them than the thing they're responding to.
Oh, exactly.
It's like when I saw your work from home, I was uncomfortable, but it made me question the discomfort, and I realized intimacy, it's always been shown in like one or two ways. It's like this super platonic, like, oh, friendship versus, or sex. And it's like, this was neither.
No.
This was an intimacy and a vulnerability that I didn't know how to handle.
Yeah.
And that I had to sit with that discomfort and kind of figure out, like, what is this? And is this something I've ever experienced? Is this something I want to experience? It's like, again, I look inward and really look into that. And I think that was the beauty of your work for me, was, you know, it challenging me in my capacity to love and be loved in a way that was unfamiliar to me. I didn't even know how to recognize it.
Yeah.
So that was the big beauty I got out of home.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, it's talking about a lot of painful topics.
Yeah.
It's talking about child abuse. It's talking about, you know, having a mother that is mentally unwell, addiction, and survival.
Yeah.
And how we survived through the years, even if both of us may be difficult, or even if both of us have experienced this great trauma, how we came together to find that love and that connection, to be able to create a very intimate relationship, even though it could be based on trauma. And I think when people look at it, they may be reminded of their old trauma that they may have never addressed, or it's different for everybody, right? Once you give it to the world, it's going to be different. It's no longer yours. But I like the fact when people talk about my work, they look at it and they're like, this is challenging to look at.
Yeah.
And then it goes, what am I looking at? And then you're like, I'm not sure. And then you go to the fact of, like, it's bravery, trauma, addiction, and then you come back to it and it makes you think. It's not something that you look at and be like, oh my God, that's a beautiful painting I'm gonna walk on. And you have to challenge people when they look at work, especially when you're talking about your community, and especially when you're trying to talk about the true things that a lot of women have went through throughout their time. And it's been stigmatized to not talk about or feel shameful about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a way of being honest, but challenging, and then making people feel not alone. And I'm not saying that's all women. All women have very different experiences.
Right.
But working with the people and trauma groups and different women I've met throughout the years and their stories, it just happens so frequently and to so many women, and you would just be surprised by the amount that is normalized, and, you know, just the trauma after trauma after trauma. So kind of creating this work that faces it, right? Like, you need to face your trauma. You need to tell your truth, even if you're just accepting the truth to yourself. It can be so liberating and healing in a sense, right? It's going to be painful at first, but it's healing. And, you know, it could help other women. And again, you know, femininity is, it comes across so many different types, and what it is to be a woman. So there's that too.
So I kind of want to pivot a little bit, because what I'm thinking now is, and I think that's the power of art and design. I think art has the ability to facilitate space for conversations to happen, for ideas to be exchanged, for experiences to be shared, for connections to be made. And I was sharing with our friend Michael about, like, I also think design institutes action towards something. And so when put hand in hand, I think they can be very powerful. So, you know, my next thought or question is, like, how do we amplify the role of art and design in these social changes we're seeking to make?
Right, awareness, getting it out to more eyes, making the work, representing more, having more women tell their story and feel comfortable telling their story and having that intimacy and trust. And it makes the whole community feel that they're not alone. And then it can also help a social change if we want to pivot to social change, right? And awareness. and what that means. And, you know, talking about my work with my mom, that's trauma, right? What it means to be a woman that has been through that and still suffers from that, and just awareness that other women are not alone, right? And then social change and being an advocate, right? If you're seeing these stories, it can spark social change for programs to be created for people that might not have insurance to be able to go get the help they need, or enter a group that talks about domestic violence or change for women that do feel scared, you know. So it also can spark that. But there's different ways, and throughout my years I've done different bodies of work, but it all kind of comes back to, you know, the feminine, what it means to be feminine, how you function in the world. And I do think in today's time and climate, if we want to go there,
why not? Yeah.
Talking about women and being, you know,
bodily autonomy is key here.
Yeah, bodily, yes, exactly. And and like taking rights from women that they've had about their own, like you said, bodily autonomy. Oh God, I can't talk. Please say it out loud for me.
Bodily autonomy.
Thank you. Okay, I stutter sometimes. I'm a silly lady. But no, right? And so we're talking about a lot of trauma has to deal with not having control about somebody who did something, usually men, to your body. And so that takes away, you know, your power and the control you have of your own body and your own existence. And like, what does it mean to come back from that? Like, and now we're living in a climate where, you know, I don't have control of my body. I'm an older lady, and if I happen to get pregnant, I would have to have a baby, even though it would be a geriatric prognosis, they say, which could cause lots of problems. You know, health issues and problems. Same thing with my sister. I love her to death, but she's got a lot of trauma of her own, and you know, has had to have 2 babies, even though she wasn't able to financially support them. She did, and this is so awful to say, I love my nieces, but necessarily wasn't ready to be a mother, right? And this is all very new. And so just the idea of choice and choice being taken away.
Well, there's also a sense of safety. Like I have relatives whose health were put on the line for giving birth. I mean, almost died. Like it's a serious thing, even with modern medicine. You know, mortality rates for giving birth is Like to your point, like mortality rate, like people dying giving birth is still a thing, especially around Black and brown women. Like they're still vulnerable to that. There's an artist that does a lot talking about awareness. Like a lot of his work as an artist is about raising awareness. He started a nonprofit doing that up in New York about why we need better and more adequate health care for Black and brown people who can have kids, so that way we're not having these deaths from complications. And so like there's that angle, right? But it still goes back to the need of autonomy. And like you said, raising awareness of that and of that complexity. So this other question I have, really, it's a little more individualistic. It's a little more personal. So aside from protests in the streets, donations, you know, how else can you commit to social change or contribute to social change through your practice?
Right? So I mean, continue to have that awareness for women and their autonomy, and that means mental health. I think a lot of that is, it's not accessible to everybody, and making awareness of these things and making sure to try to be an advocate to say, hey, we need more programs that are going to be able to give these free quality programs. Let's say quality too is very important here.
That's very important.
Very important. Quality to actually invoke change and help. And I think I grew up very poor, and those things were deprived for my mother, for me at an early age, right? And if we want to talk about social change, like making these projects that are difficult to look at, right, of traumas and things that women have been through, that could be the lens of making awareness for that, trying to spark programs for that, and also having, autonomy over your own body. You can go at it from two angles. You can do that and that, like representations of the woman body and what it means to be a woman, right? What does that look like? Ownership of yourself, whether you want to change yourself, but it's your choice. And I think as men, you guys don't have to suffer from that. That's fine.
No.
And so, right? Yeah. And I think that ties into both works. The work I've done with you, the Transparent Project, and then my personal work too, right? And like creating that awareness to say, it could be difficult to look at, but it's beautiful and it is a topic that we need to address. And it's a topic that sometimes we don't, because there's a lot of different things happening that are trauma-based in this world right now. But women need a voice.
Absolutely.
And that is, it is all women that need a voice. And I think, be it through a lens of a camera, be it through printmaking or cliche viers or painting, however you want to do it, to cause awareness, make artwork, give this artwork, just wholeheartedly give to, different charities that are trying to build awareness and trying to make change and trying to provide women with the services they need is critical, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it can be a catalyst to, to earn funds. I mean, today's climate's a little bit harder for people to have that disposable income for art, but, artists, grandma ring. And that can be a cute little goober moment.
It's all good.
But to be able to help give women a voice and a platform to share their experiences, and that they are important, and that they do need to be recognized, and there does need to be change within the system that happens that supports them. No matter if it's women with trauma that's painful or if it's representation. Like, I think the arts really, you're making images, you're designing work that that forces the viewer to see it. And I think once you do that, that causes awareness. And then there's also the thing of, again, being an advocate, making this work, giving it to the world to try to help foundations or charities promote programs for women, I think is very critical too.
Absolutely. So, what I'm hearing a lot is the need to, I kind of want to reframe it a little bit, because my perspective is saying investing in your community, pouring into the community. Because one of the arguments I've heard about this, especially when you talk about quality programs is
the issue.
I feel like you may be familiar with this argument too about why are we pouring so much in people who haven't worked for it? And that is a perspective.
That's a male perspective.
You're being so
privileged. I'm gonna just totally call bullshit there.
Right. Okay. So you are familiar with this?
Yes. That is coming from a single mother on welfare, being extremely poor. When people say that, it's just like, oh my God, that's a privilege. Not everyone. Yes. And
the ignorance to that is a sign of such privilege. It's the highest form of privilege from what I hear. Because the other element of that is, because there's a specific narrative I've heard about that, particularly to Black and brown folks, despite that actually a lot of white folks benefit from these programs too.
Yeah.
I
grew up on one.
Yeah. Black people alone only make up 14% of the population, so we're not doing that much damage. But even then, my issue is it's still a reframing. Because the argument in that narrative is that you're thinking of this as a wasted money or a handout. No, these are hand ups. These are ways to invest in your community, invest in the talent that's there, so they can be on equal footing to really do great things. We look at folks that come from these rags to riches stories, your story as well, and we see the success that's coming there. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, well, imagine how much more that would have been if we poured more into people that needed it.
Yeah.
So I think of it as an investment. And so, in that, and it's kind of I say all that for my last question is like, are we obligated to leverage our access and privilege for the advocacy of others and the changes that we seek? If so, how? And if not, why?
Yes, of course. Right?
Yes.
And I totally agree with the statement, right? Not everybody gets these chances, and not everybody gets to benefit from these programs. And you see poverty continue through generation and generation, and usually with poverty comes abuse and hardship sometimes, right? And you just see it kind of just cycling and growing. And not everybody gets a chance. These success stories that you talk about are very, 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 very tiny within the scope of everything, right? So as artists, it's our power if we can make work, if we can spark change, if we can spark awareness, if we can contribute by selling our work to make sure the correct charities that are doing the right work for the community, for all of these women are funded, then yes, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to sell, and I know this is going to sound bad, but if I'm going to sell a photo to an affluent family or a painting to it's somebody that can afford it, why can't some of that money be recycled to the people who need it?
Exactly.
And I think that's a big thing that we could talk about, because I know I've been all over the place.
No, I think
all different,
this has been a fun conversation.
Different topics, but I really feel heated about this because I was told, or my mom got so much shame growing up from being quote unquote what somebody would call a welfare queen, but she wasn't. She was raising 3 kids on her own, working 2.5 jobs, trying to better them, trying and using the resources that were available to her. And thank God she lived in a democratic state that really took pride in helping less fortunate people. That is not the case. I have lived all around the United States, and I am always truly appalled when I see different states, sometimes southern states, that don't provide adequate care at all.
No.
And adequate attention. And it is sickening. But then there's pristine, beautiful streets and, in areas of wealth and privilege.
Yeah.
And it is just, it's so appalling.
It makes me go back again to that question, who controls the narrative? And I think that, at least for me, that's a big takeaway with this. And like you said, the art being raising awareness. And maybe that's the strength of us creatives.
Yeah.
I think we have the power to reset who has control of that narrative through the awareness we generate, through the images we make.
Yeah.
And I think that's where our real superpowers are coming from. At least that's what I'm getting from your narrative.
That's where your real superpowers are coming from. Because who controls the narrative most of times are not the underprivileged or not somebody who is the other, quote unquote, right? So the more awareness we can create, the more advocacy we can create, the better to help our communities.
Yes.
Being, and it could be numerous communities that you're helping by doing, for me, it's always about my women, my sisters, right? But I mean, I think as all different artists, and I know you're going to meet with plenty of different artists to talk about this, and they're going to represent a community and make awareness. But the more that artists can come together and do that, and even work together to support, make art, create art that, can be a lens to view numerous communities and what they need, right? Collaborations with other artists that maybe you wouldn't think about, collaborating with. Maybe your work is very different, but coming together to really give these people a voice, right? And to just create as much social change as we can, and we're allowed to, just as it is with, us being artists. We might not have as much power, but we do have power.
Right.
And images are louder than you think. No matter what discipline you choose to use, images speak louder and are more accessible to a lot of, to a lot more people. So being an image maker, there is a responsibility to take care of your community and your people, especially if you have a heart that wants to do so. And I'm not saying that all image makers have an art that have a heart where they want to do so, but
fair enough, I think that's what inspires me, not just of you, but of all the artists I've had the privilege of meeting. So I really, again, thank you so much for this. This inspires me, and hopefully whoever's watching this to continue. Thank you so much for watching. That was such a fun conversation. Before we go, I want to update you on a few things. First of all, JTR Presents just launched an artist resource map. This map is intended to centralize information regarding the resources. That can be equipment, venue spaces, exhibition spaces, residency programs, or other funding for artists to continue their creative practice and for our voices to still be heard and our stories to still be told. Secondly, there are other resources relating to voting. Your representation and your voice does matter, especially in the upcoming elections. You can find more information somewhere around this video. It's probably at the bottom in the description, but please, please, please get out and vote and make sure you're represented. Third, please donate to your local artist organizations or any art organizations that resonate with you. A lot of times us artists and creatives rely on organizations like the National Endowment of the Arts or our regional or art council that often offer funding for our programs or funding for programs for other organizations or offer funding for us artists to continue our work through residencies or just giving us the money directly. So donate to those institutions so they can continue to empower us to do the work that we're doing. And then lastly, I just want to let you know that your life, your voice, and your money matter, and they make a big difference, even if it's something small. Thank you again. Hope to see you soon.